What's going on, y'all? It's JD Piquel today on the Hard Count. We need to start having this conversation around Brock Bowers for Heisman. Welcome into the Hard Count, the people's show for every single thing that you know and that you love about college football. It happens here on a daily basis. Why? Because Nick Brake does the heavy lifting, and you can help drive the show by subscribing to the channel. We are surging. We want you along for the ride. We want you a part of this community. This thing's taking off, and we want you on board. Roll, party, roll. Now, we're also on podcast, whether you get on Apple or whether you get on Spotify. Wherever you get it, you can find your podcasts. You can find the Hard Count in your podcast, rather. We appreciate you in advance. So Brock Bowers is plus 20,000 right now in terms of his odds to win the Heisman Trophy. And I don't know about you, but after what I saw against South Carolina from number 19, we need to start having this conversation. Because he had 3 touchdowns. He looks like a creative player out there. He's going to light up the stat sheet. And he is, for my money, the best player on Georgia's football team. I know he's only a sophomore. I understand Stetson Bennett's the quarterback. But my eyes work just fine. He's the best player on that team. So let's just say he were to beat the 20,000 odds, the plus 20,000 odds, and he does win the Heisman Trophy. How could this happen? What would have to happen? Well, first and foremost, they're finding creative ways to get him the football. Case in point, they ran that reverse to him on the goal line. You can call a reverse to your skill players. Typically, it's going to be to a wide receiver who's really fast, or maybe a running back lines up in the slot. You get him the football. They ran the reverse to the tight end. Kirby is going to find creative ways to get him the football. And I guarantee you, if he finds himself in that Heisman Trophy conversation, they're going to continue to force the issue and pad those stats. Don't believe me? Look at last year. Remember Jordan Davis, big defensive lineman? He was kind of on that Heisman bubble for a minute. They lined him up in the backfield, got him an offensive touchdown. So how does that look for Brock Bowers as the year carries on? We'll see. But I'm just telling you, if you don't think that Kirby Smart even cares a little bit, just a teensy bit about his guy getting the Heisman Trophy, I think you're wrong. Now, is it going to take precedent over game plan? Absolutely not. But if they have opportunity to force feed him the ball and pad his stats, they're going to do that. On top of this, Georgia is going to win enough games to get him to New York, okay? We know how this works. The best player on the best team wins the Heisman Trophy. Will Georgia be the best team at the end of the year? For Brock Bowers' sake, I hope so. But at the very least, you don't have to worry about wins being an issue for Brock Bowers getting there. Now you say, okay, well, is he the best player on the best team? Because Stetson Bennett is starting to make some noise. We've had this conversation before. We are Stetson Bennett stans here on this program on the Hard Count. But you have to understand this. There is a stigma around Stetson Bennett, and it's not totally his fault. But from a public perspective, it's going to be hard to shake that and ultimately win the Heisman Trophy. What do we mean by that? Stetson Bennett is not super physically imposing. He's all about 5'11", probably 200 pounds. He is not necessarily a walking commercial like Baker Mayfield was when he was a walk-on and won the Heisman. Stetson Bennett just kind of goes about his business, plays on a really good team, has a lot of great players around him, and for whatever reason, there will always be some fragment of the population, a fragment of those voters even more so, that won't give Stetson Bennett his due. And so for that reason, I think if there's a person that wins the Heisman Trophy from this Georgia football team, it's Brock Bowers. For reasons we just mentioned. The star power that Stetson Bennett, not for his own fault, lacks, is why I think that you avoid that quarterback tight end splitting vote scenario. Now, would he get a vote from us? If we were making the case in point on the Hard Count for the Heisman Trophy, probably another conversation for another time. Stetson Bennett's in our Heisman race, but I think that stigma is why Brock Bowers doesn't split votes. Now, why might this not happen? What would be the things that would keep Brock Bowers from winning the Heisman Trophy? Well, first and foremost, the obvious, he's a tight end. A tight end hasn't won the Heisman Trophy since they had leather helmets and probably subpar shoulder pads. Leon Hart in 1949 was the last guy to do it. So there's that stigma of, okay, he's not a quarterback, right? Well, let's take it a step further. Let's just say it's not a quarterback that wins the Heisman Trophy this year. for Brock Bowers, he'd have to put up wide receiver-like stats, right? Devontae Smith won the Heisman Trophy, was receiver for Alabama. His stat line was 98 catches, 1,500 yards, 17 touchdowns, getting around 9 touches a game. Even if they force-feed Brock Bowers the football, based on his numbers a year ago, he would have to just about double his stat line. Now, he had about 11 or 12 touchdowns a season to go, so he's not super far off the mark there, but statistically, it is just so difficult to win the Heisman Trophy if you're not playing quarterback. So he would have to put up wide receiver kind of stats playing tight end. By nature of his position, he's blocking and he's catching the football. He's not just a full-time receiver. So the statistical piece of this is very real. Understand, I think they'd force feed him the football if he becomes a bubble guy, but even so, to win the award, you have to put up really big numbers. Can he do it? I hope so, but that's a potential snag point for him when it comes to this award. So all that's to say, Brock Bowers, could he do it? Absolutely. Is it impossible? By no stretch of the imagination. The fact that we're even having this conversation right now should tell you how good of a player Brock Bowers is. If he doesn't do it, I think you point at the tight end label, and I think you point at the statistical label. Those are the two things that could hold him back. But for how good Georgia's going to be and for how much star power Brock Bowers has and I think is still yet to tap into, is a guy to keep an eye on as this Heisman Trophy race heats up. That's it for us here on The Hard Count. We appreciate you tuning in. Subscribe to the channel. Follow me on Twitter and Instagram at JDPakel to stay with content that you cannot find anywhere else. We're going to keep the party rolling. We will see y'all next time. Hey y'all, thanks so much for watching. Subscribe to the channel here to make sure you don't miss an episode of The Hard Count. Also be sure to check out other videos on the On3 YouTube channel.